you a little background before I say what I'm about to say. Hey, I need some background music. Has anybody gotten the Meebo? Metroid Prime 4 is here, and to say it's been a long time coming would be an understatement. I'm having a really hard time grappling with the fact that 2017 was almost 9 years ago, and as we all learned at the beginning of 2019, the development of this game had not been going smoothly. Despite the major setback of this reboot, where the project would land once again in the hands of Retro Studios, I remained optimistic. As the years dragged along and trailers began to roll out, I wasn't really all that impressed with what we were seeing, yet I still had this sense of unwavering faith that Retro Studios was going to do good by the Metroid Prime series. I really didn't even question it, even though there were some legitimately concerning details about Retro that I decided to gloss over. We'll talk about those a little later. Over the course of this year, as the release got closer, the alarm bells, they really started to kick off in my head. The red flags had been making themselves apparent for a while, but it was in the final months before this game was set to launch that I started to wake up a bit. Nintendo was displaying a clear lack of confidence in their marketing of this game. And for a game that's been trapped in development for nearly a decade, you would think they'd be rolling out the red carpet to give it as good of a chance of success as it can get. But that marketing train never really picked up steam. Early first impressions only made things messier, but dude, let me tell you, I was clinging on to hope like a fat kid on cake, okay? Like a Donkey Kong on a banana. And then reviews dropped. An average Metacritic score of 80, the lowest in the Prime series, and a huge mix of reviews ranging from extremely positive down to some deep negatives. It seemed like this game would probably be at least good enough. I avoided looking too deep into these reviews because ultimately I wanted to play the game for myself and form my own opinions without any outside influence. So on December 4th, I picked it up, played it, and beat it over the weekend, and I just want to make it clear, I don't take any pleasure in what I'm about to tell you. Metroid Prime 4 is not a good Metroid game. It barely feels like it wanted to be a Metroid game at all, and there are some pretty damning reasons for this. And I know it sounds dramatic, but man, this game is tragic, man. I'm pretty disappointed by the results here, but like I just outlined, it's not like the signs weren't there. I think I just subconsciously chose to ignore them. I'm gonna unpack all this, and I like to try and weigh in with the positives and negatives, but just keep in mind, I don't have a whole lot of good things to say about this game, and I know it should go without saying, but just to be clear, these are obviously my opinions about the game. I'm happy for those of you out there that are having a good time with it. Unfortunately, I did not. Before I jump in, if you could hit that like button, it really helps these videos out. Or hit that dislike button if you think I'm a grifter. I mean, that helps too. Engagement is the key. Subscribe if you're new. Alright, let's jump into it. I'm gonna try my best to relay to you my experience with the game in the way that I do around here. I don't have like a beat for beat script typed out, aside from like the opening that you guys just heard. So I guess I'll just try to kick this thing off with like some of the positive aspects, because I mean there are some nice things that I can say about Metroid Prime 4. Based on my experience with the game, it peaks in the early hours, and it kind of just gradually starts to fall off from there. And that's where most of my footage in this video is going to be from, just from like the first 2 or 3-ish hours of gameplay. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who does still want to play the game, so I'm not gonna go like super heavy into spoiler territory or anything. Just to be clear, just letting you know, just thought you might want to know, man.
Talk to it, man.
The opening area of the game in particular had a really nice sense of like wow factor to it when it comes to the visuals. Every time a new door opened to like a new section of the opening area, dude, I mean like this was me. I'm like, damn, that is nice. Easily some of the nicest looking visuals that I've seen in a Nintendo game. It's nice to have a game that's able to showcase a little bit of what the Switch 2 is going to be capable of. It gets me excited for what we might be able to expect from games further down the line. Unfortunately, on the opposite side of that coin, I can't say that the visuals hold up for the entire game. Again, I really gotta emphasize, the later you get into the game, the more just quite literally every aspect of this game really starts to fall off, including the visuals. One of the final areas of the game that comes to mind was really just like not great looking. And I know you've probably seen and heard all about it, but yeah, the desert. The desert is really unappealing. In more ways than just the visuals, but we'll get to that. Moving on from that, let's talk a little bit about the game's controls. I mean, it controls nice enough. Feels good, you know, feels like you would expect for a Metroid Prime game. I can say I wasn't crazy about like the gyro aiming and like kind of motion control aspect of it. I turned the gyro off pretty quickly. I play on a Pro controller, so I wasn't really super in love with how that felt. The alternative to the gyro with just the, you know, the stick aiming wasn't exactly always the perfect solution, but I made it work. It could be a little bit cumbersome, especially during certain boss fights. I'm actually a little surprised that they included this sort of motion aiming at all. Yeah, to me, in a way, it felt a bit like a relic of the Wii era that, again, I just didn't really love, but I made do with it, you know. Aside from that, yeah, the game controlled fine. It was fine. And the music is pretty great, too, I gotta say. You know, the music you're allowed to listen to. Very atmospheric, very pleasant to the ears, very tingly to the senses. A lot of people are saying they think it might even be the best soundtrack in the Prime series, and I would need to go back and listen to the other soundtracks to really get a good feel for that, but it does its job. I enjoyed it. Alright, I'm at a point where if any other positive aspects cross my mind, I'll be sure to bring them up, but genuinely I'm struggling to come up with anything else. Truly, again, this is unfortunate. I just felt like the game peaked early, but I hate to say it, it's not really high praise, you know, me saying that. Right off the rip, the intro to the game didn't really feel super Metroid-y to me. Like this war going on or something, and I don't know, you got all these different characters yapping away that you're trying to save, I guess. It didn't really pull me in and get me into like a Metroid kind of mood, you know what I mean? And unfortunately, it never really did. I never got to a point with this game where I felt like I was fully immersed and like I was fully hooked into the game. I was waiting for that moment to come up, and it just kind of never did. I felt like I was just sort of going through the motions. I wasn't ever that deeply engaged with anything that was going on here, and it's rare that you ever feel that sense of isolation, which is the biggest element to the immersion factor of Metroid games to me. I don't think that's a very hot take. There are light hints and sprinklings of your typical Metroid game elements here, but like I've kind of already expressed in a couple of different ways, this game really didn't feel like a Metroid game for the bulk of my playtime. I know I'm being kind of vague, so let me jump in a little bit deeper here. Let me get into some specifics. By far, my biggest gripe with this game is just how painfully linear it was the entire time. I don't expect Metroid games to be these, like, gigantic, sprawling open worlds or anything like that, but I expect at least a bit more meaningful exploration from the world of these games than what you get here. Levels effectively feel like very linear hallways. That was something I noticed from the very beginning, and that was where my doubt and worry began to set in. I was really feeling like, oh no. And if the hallway level structure wasn't bad enough, it's also the fact that each of these locations are totally isolated, totally segregated by this big, empty desert hub world. You visit each of these locations separately, run down through the hallway to get the power-up at the end of the place, which allows you to get into the next place, is basically what it is. Essentially, these levels and locations end up feeling more akin to like, Zelda dungeons than Metroid levels. And really weak Zelda dungeons at that, because the puzzle elements are incredibly light. Like, a lot of the gameplay loop in these places had me just bored to tears, man. Here's what you can expect. Walk into a room, scan a whole bunch of shit. Occasionally you scan a thing that you then get to interact with, and then you move along. Sometimes you walk into a room and there are some enemies. There's like 3 enemy types in the whole game, and they're all bullet sponges. So you're kind of just dancing around shooting at these enemies that occasionally just feel like they're endless. They just keep spawning one after the other, and they all take forever to kill. It's not like there's a whole lot of variety in how you get to take these enemies down. I mean, for the most part, it's just dodge around, blend blast a whole bunch, and switching between your primary fire and like missiles to shoot at enemies also doesn't feel very good because there's a big delay in between shots. So again, it didn't really feel good to even try to chain your two primary means of attack together to defeat enemies with. In a lot of ways, the gameplay here just feels really outdated. Like, this was fine in 2002 or whenever it was that the first Metroid Prime game came out, but here we are, 20 plus years later, and it kind of just makes this whole thing feel like reheated leftovers. Bosses suffer from the same fate as the common enemy types. They are painfully drawn out. You just dump a bunch of fire into a weak spot, which stuns them eventually so that you can unload into their real weak spot. They get back up, rinse, repeat. It's a shame because I can see that there are some good ideas on display here with the bosses. Generally, I think the way that a lot of them play out are better than what I can remember from the first Prime game. I'm using that as my point of reference because that's the one I've played the most recently. But again, it's just the fact that they just overstay their welcome. Now then, alright, for the moment you've all been waiting for. Let's talk about those funny little NPCs. This was a big point of contention for games media that managed to get early hands-on time with the game. The dialogue that I had heard wasn't exactly what I would imagine or hope for from a Metroid game. Gave off some very Marvel-esque vibes, but I figured it was probably going to be something I'd be able to gloss over if the rest of the game was good, and if you didn't have to deal with these characters all that often. I've seen a lot of people trying to convince others that these characters are not that big of a deal, and they aren't that prominent throughout. Do not let these people fool you. This guy, Miles McKenzie, is the one that you've probably heard the most about. He's the most frequently recurring of all of these characters, and like, he doesn't tag along with Samus for like the whole adventure or anything, but he does chime in a lot over the communication system. He's pretty inescapable. Once you break away from him in the early hours of the game is when the game starts to feel the most Metroid-like. And honestly, yeah, that's about where it peaks as far as feeling like a Metroid game. You do get some sense of isolation and immersion, but it is frequently broken up because of these characters. And it only gets worse the deeper into the game you go. From about the midway point forward, it just stops trying to be a Metroid game altogether. You encounter a bunch more of these Federation soldiers, I think they are, and they tag along with you for the entire rest of the ride, and they're chatty the whole time. One of the final levels in this game is an escort mission, essentially. And dude, people complained about Miles' dialogue. There's a character that I think is even worse than him in this game. She's like a Samus fangirl, essentially, and she's just constantly doing the fangirl thing for Samus. And the interactions, too, they're just so weird, because Samus doesn't talk in this game. Not once. So most of the time, it's just these characters talking at you while Samus stares blankly. It's painful. So yeah, no, these characters do not work. These characters do not work for a Metroid game. And even if I could put up with them and their yapping and their being a part of Samus's adventure and strapped to her ass the whole time, that's not even the worst part about them being here. It's the fact that they feel this incessant need to constantly hold your hand and tell you exactly what to do at every turn, dude. It doesn't stop. This game never builds the confidence to let go of the hand of the player. Like, this is a Metroid game, dude. I want to explore. I want to figure out some of these things for myself. You don't get that opportunity. Spend more than a minute or two in the desert, and Miles is gonna chime in over those communications and tell you exactly where to go and exactly what to do. It's extra hilarious to me because most of these levels are just fucking straight lines. It's a hallway. I can either go forward or backward. It's not like I have a whole lot of options, man. Let me figure it out. Felt like a toddler on a leash in this game. And it's hilarious too because these characters all know that Samus is well regarded as a badass bounty hunter, and yet they constantly feel the need to give you direction and tell you exactly what to do and how to do it. It was frustrating. It was incredibly un-Metroid-like. Ultimately, this causes the story to not even really feel like Samus's story. The focus is placed entirely on these Federation soldiers, and look, if you want to have these characters, if you demand that they are a part of the story, you need to develop them in a way that makes me care. But as you might expect, they're pretty shallow and don't get any meaningful development, which is an overall issue with the story in general. Aside from a mid-game revelation about the alien enemies, the story lacks any real depth or cohesiveness. By the end of my playthrough, I was left wondering why Sylux was even here at all. His presence is completely tacked on and the payoff just completely falls flat. For some reason, this guy got an amiibo? Where's my King K. Rool amiibo, Nintendo? I'm still waiting on that. Hey, by the way, total side thing here. Did I mention that you need a $30 amiibo to unlock the background music in the desert? Yeah, that part of the game where you're gonna be spending at least a third of your playtime. A part of the game that would greatly benefit from having some music because it's so fucking barren. $30 paywall. $30 paywall, yeah. Although, I have been told that you can 100% the game and play it again to unlock the music. You know, the exact point of the game where you would be ready to put it down. You can have music. Editor Al chiming in. Turns out that was misinformation. People were so eager to defend this game's honor that they rushed to spread a fake narrative. The amiibo is the only means to unlock music for the desert. You can unlock extra tracks after you 100% the game, but the amiibo is still a requirement for this. Goddamn, speaking of that desert. Slight spoilers for very late into the game. There's 2 sets of big dumb fetch quests that come right at the very end of the game, where you have to drive around this desert and collect an ungodly amount of crystals, and if you're like me and you didn't spend a whole lot of time collecting those damn crystals throughout the whole rest of your experience, you're gonna be here a while. You're looking at 2 to 3 hours of driving around, smashing crystals, and this is in an already pretty short game. It's really painfully obvious that this was meant as a way to pad out the game. They knew it was too short, so drive around for 2 or 3 hours smashing crystals. But the other fetch quest requires you to like collect a couple of pieces to a thing, and that alone wouldn't have been too terrible, but it really just put a big sour taste in my mouth right at the end of the game. And another slight spoiler, I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but the climax of this game, I did not like it. Not gonna lie, it kind of pissed me off a little bit. Just a really bitter ending. Samus has to make a decision that it feels completely out of character to me. Like, I had to go back after the fact just to make sure I didn't have any other choice, and I didn't. It's just how the game ends. I didn't love it. And that's probably how I can sum up my entire experience with Metroid Prime 4. I didn't love it. This game is a tragic case. It's a game that didn't even want to be what it needed to be, which was just a good, fun, solid Metroidvania game. I'm confused by the decision-making here to skew away from the more Metroid-y elements. Metroidvanias, especially in the last decade, have really exploded in popularity. Hollow Knight, with a single release, rivaled the sales of the entire Metroid series combined. It's safe to say that with the addition of Silksong, that this little series will be leaving Metroid in the dust. So with Prime 4, instead of taking notes and learning from its contemporaries and building on the foundation, it regresses the elements that you've come to expect from the genre, or at the very least it heavily waters them down. The 8 years of development time is really on full display here in all the worst ways. Usually if a game has this long of a development cycle, that's not a good sign. Metroid Prime 4 has been through the ringer, man. You could really feel by the end that this thing was just limping across the finish line, and it becomes abundantly clear why Nintendo didn't have the confidence to give it a big marketing push before it released. I believe the first version of this game was in development at Bandai Namco, from what is being said, and unfortunately, I feel like that's pretty telling for the current state of Retro Studios, I mean, this game clearly did not live up to the legacy that Retro Studios has built up for themselves. And you know, when you peel back the curtain a little bit and get a glimpse of what's been going on over at Retro Studios, it makes sense. I mean, you figure they haven't shipped a game, a brand new game, since 2014 with Tropical Freeze. Rumors and leaks indicate that they've had multiple shelved projects over the last 11 or so years. And so I think Nintendo may have been hesitant to hand this game to Retro Studios. I think it was just sort of a Hail Mary at that point. Nintendo had already announced the game, so there was an expectation for them to release something, but there really wasn't any kind of vision or passion or drive to bring Metroid Prime back outside of, well, I mean, the fans want it, but the ideas weren't there. The desire to make this game doesn't feel like it was there. It was an obligation game. Retro Studios was obligated to make another Metroid Prime game after the passion for it had dried up nearly 20 years ago. It's a tough pill to swallow, and a disappointing one at that. I was rooting all the way, man. I was rooting all the way for Metroid Prime 4 to come out and knock our socks off, but instead, I feel like this might even be the weakest Metroid game, at least that I have played. I know there's other M. I only ever played a little bit of that one, and it doesn't have a great reputation. Maybe if I went and played that through the whole way, I would find that to be worse. But yeah, of all the Metroid games I've played, definitely was not a fan of this one. It's disappointing, but it is what it is, right? Not every game is gonna be a winner. It's just a shame that Metroid Prime also had to not be a winner. I feel like if Nintendo wants to take another stab at 3D Metroid, like, I might get crucified for this, but I feel like the way that Metroid Other M plays, at the very least, isn't too far off from what I imagine a 3D Metroid game could be. Third-person action with some tight Metroid level design, fun exploration. That could go hard, I'm just saying. Obviously, that game was borked in a lot of other ways, but I feel like they were on the right path, at the very least. Metroid Prime, I think, is just one of those series that it probably should have just stayed in the past, but it is what it is. What are you gonna do? Hopefully a new 2D Metroid isn't too far around the corner. I really enjoyed Metroid Dread. I mean, I gotta say, that's probably my favorite Metroid game at this point. It was a blast, and it was a couple of years ago at this point, so who knows? Mercury Steam. They might have been cooking something up. It might not be too far off. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. If you're looking for a better Metroid Prime fix, I'd highly recommend Metroid Prime Remastered. I already know there are probably a ton of angry comments from people who didn't watch this far that are saying the other Prime games are just as linear. Prime 1 doesn't exactly give you the freedom to go anywhere and do anything you want, but the sense of exploration and puzzle solving is what gives it that little extra zip that Prime 4 is sorely lacking. You gotta scan your map and do some actual routing to go where you need to go, not just walking down a straight singular line through a hallway. You get to make actual decisions for yourself, and of course the feeling of isolation is at its isolatiest here. But yeah, I also recommend Dread. It is super damn good. I think that just about covers everything that I wanted to cover here. I mean, I at least touched on all the big things. Oh, I guess Samus has psychic powers. That's something I can say. But they're just slight variations on, like, abilities that she's had in other games. It really isn't that big of a game changer. Okay, I think that's it now. I want to hear from you guys. You know, how many of you out there have picked up Metroid Prime 4? How do you feel about it? I mean, do you agree with a lot of the stuff I said? Do you disagree? Either way is fine. I want to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below how you might be enjoying it. Hit that like button if you liked, subscribe if you're new, dislike if you disliked it. I think I'm gonna fire up some Metroid Dread. Okay, bye.